الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله وحده والصلاة والسلام على من لا نبي بعده وعلى آله وصحبه ومن تمسك بسنته إلى يوم الدين وسلم تسليما كثيرا أما بعد. As we continue, 7:09 p.m., Thursday, August the 8th, 2022, and this evening of Thursday, by Tariq al-Miladi, by the Gregorian calendar, which agrees with Tariq al-Hijri, where the Islamic count or the Islamic date is now the 20th of Muharram, as it is Masa al-Khamis, the 20th of Muharram, the year 1440, the year 1444, after the migration of our Prophet, alayhi salatu wassalam. We were discussing the affair pertaining to the great speech of Abdul Aziz, rahimahullah, Ibn Abdullah, Ibn Abi Salama al-Majishun. He said in his great beneficial speech, as we were speaking about where he said, rahimahullah, he says, اعرف رحمك الله غناك عن تكلف صفة ما لم يصف الرب من نفسه. As we discussed, we'll go over quickly what we mentioned. Allah has freed you from the burden or the duty of describing Him or affirming to Allah of what He did not describe Himself with, or burdening yourself of trying to find how the characteristics of our Lord is tabaraka wa ta'ala, as we mentioned. Due to the fact you'll find that it says بِعَجْزِكَ عَنْ مَعْرِفَةِ قَدْرِ مَا وُصِفَ مِنْهَا, due to the fact of your incapability of attaining of how His characteristics are, or what He's been described with. إذا لم تعرف قدر ما وصف فما تكلفك علم ما لم يصف. As we said in the explanation we were discussing, he says, if you do not know how those characteristics are in which Allah has described Himself, you don't know how it is. فما تكلفك علم ما لم يصف. Why burden yourself with the duty of a knowledge of what Allah did not burden you with, nor did He describe Himself with? Can you use that as an evidence of anything to now increase in His obedience or refrain from something of His disobedience? This is what we mentioned last class. So we'll go over this quickly so we can start the new text today, because all this is a continuation of what the great Imam Ibn al-Majishun mentioned within the text that Shaykh al-Islam had run as a narration, conveying it, or rather ascribing the statement here from the great Imam Ibn al-Majishun, where Shaykh al-Islam mentioned this in his book. Not only did he mention it in Hamawiyah, but notice that he also ascribed that these athar, or these narrations, were mentioned in the great books of the Sunnah, such as the Sunnah by the great Imam Abu Bakr ibn Afram, as we mentioned in his book called Sunnah, and also Ibn Battah in his book called Ibad, and also the great Imam from Qurtuba, from the great city of Spain, because we know Spain was ruled by the Muslims, in Portugal. There was a city in that country, which is now today Spain and Portugal. That's where Qurtuba. As I'm sure that everyone is familiar with Imam al-Qurtubi. Qurtubi was from the great Imam from Ahl Sunnah, who resided in the lands currently today is Spain and Portugal, that area, all the way up to France. And when the Muslims penetrated France, they were almost to the UK. They were on their way. But anyway, there was a great Imam from the A'imma of Qurtuba. And in the cities of Qurtuba, there was an area called Talamanca. That's who you'll find Shaykh al-Islam also mentioned who mentioned the speech of Ibn al-Majishun was another Imam. His name was Abu Umar al-Talamanki. He was from the city of Talamanca, which is in the country of Qurtuba, which was originally for the Muslims. They called it, and I think they translate it as Cordova. Cordova, currently today, is the land of Spain. But anyway, Abu Umar al-Talamanki, he also brought the same isnad of this narration upon Abdul Aziz ibn Abdullah al-Majishun. So remember the past two lessons and last week we were mentioning these narrations of this tremendous speech by this great Imam Ibn al-Majishun, who was from Al-Madinah. So all these great Imam conveyed this great statement from Ibn al-Majishun. From them was Abu Bakr ibn Athram, who was from the great students of Imam Ahmad, which he mentioned in his Sunnah, and also the great Imam Ibn Battah that he mentioned in Ibana, and also Abu Umar al-Talamanki. Now I'll get into his biography. We'll touch on it a little bit in a moment. But all these great Imam conveyed this great, beneficial, profound statements of the great Imam Ibn al-Majishun. So we'll continue what Ibn al-Majishun mentions, inshallah. But it's incumbent upon the Muslims to familiarize oneself with the history of the Muslims, of where they dominated and what they ruled, because you'll be astonished with the accomplishments of the Muslims, of where they ruled and how Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala blessed them to almost take over the world. Which you'll find that the non-Muslims to this day, they are frightful of that ever happening again. It was the most greatest and superior and dominated, if you want to say, dominant affair that had taken over the world in such a quick time. It was greater than any of them, greater than all the different types of tyranny of Genghis Khan. The Muslims did way on a higher level by conquering and dominating so many lands so quickly, all the way up to China, close to the border of China, where Uzbekistan is, or where it resides. Those lands or those countries where they call the stands, such as Uzbekistan and Tajikistan, which is close to Spain, all the way to the opposite side of the world, where the UK is, and France and Spain is. The Muslims took over all those lands. And they were on their way of conquering the world in a very quick time, in which the non-Muslims to this day bury that history. And they don't want you to know, due to the fact that if the Muslims really knew their power, and they would restore their power by uniting upon one aqidah and under the same scholars, then the honor of the Muslims would be restored. They would be what? By Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's permission, they would be unstoppable. And this is what they're afraid of. But anyway, the great Imam Ibn al-Majishun, rahimahullah, let's continue what he says. So he mentioned in the statement by Shaykh al-Islam conveyed upon his Imam that Ibn al-Majishun, that he mentioned and said, فَأَمَّا الَّذِي جَحَدْ مَا وَصَفَ الرَّبْ مِنْ نَفْسِهِ تَعَمُّقًا وَتَكْلِفًا أو تكلفا فقد استهوته الشياطين في الأرض حيران. Let's read quickly what he mentioned yesterday. We'll connect everything together. As we mentioned and said yesterday, the great Imam Ibn Majishun, he says, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has set yourself free, or set you free, O servant of Allah, from burdening yourself and take it as a duty. Characteristics that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala did not describe himself with. Meaning, Allah Ta'ala did not give you the burden of knowing how to ascribe him a characteristic from yourself or from your own opinion. Allah saved you from that duty. He did it himself. He informed you about himself, that he has these names, he has these characteristics, and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala saved us from trying to attain a reality you will never be able to attain, which is knowing how they are. As Ibn al-Majishun, he goes on to say, بِعَجْزِكَ عَنْ مَعْرِفَةِ قَدْرِ مَا وُصِفَ مِنْهَا. Due to the fact that Allah has full knowledge of your incapability, of knowledge of attaining what? How those characteristics are which he has described. He says, إِذَا لَمْ تَعْرِفْ قَدْرَ مَا وَصَفْ فَمَا تَكَلُّفُكَ عِلْمَ مَا لَمْ يَصِفْ. So, let's go over quickly what we mentioned last class. Verily, Your father, the great Imam Muhammad Ahmad Jami, when he was given more clarification in these tremendous, profound statements of the great Imam Ibn al-Majishun, he says, Innaka ghani, verily, O servants of Allah, from the women and the men, for the men and the women, excuse me, bi an tatakallaf, that you would take on as a duty or burden yourself, that you will bring or ascribe a characteristic for Allah that He did not describe Himself with. So He saved you from that. Who fell into this? The philosophers. The philosophers started to ascribe to Allah with different names, such as Al-Aql, the mind, or Al-Illa, the reason, or Illatul Wujud, the reason of existence, or Al-Aql Al-Fa'al, the main head intellect that constantly does. These are the type of philosophical terminologies that they use to describe Allah. So these are the affairs Allah saved you from now bringing something of a title or a description that Allah did not describe Himself with. He saved you from this, where you'll find that these people fell into it. And from them is the philosophers. Even though they themselves differ in the different terminologies that are used, describing Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala with those terminologies. So, he goes on to say, اعرف ذلك. Know that your incapability of attaining the knowledge of how He is described with those characteristics. That is the affair that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala knows we're incapable of. And this is what Ibn al-Majishun goes on to say. He said, وَكَيْفِيَةَ مَا وَصَفَ مِنْهَا أي مِنْ صِفَاتِ الرَّبِّ وَإِنَّمَا تُؤْمِنُ بِهَا. From the characteristics that Allah has informed of Himself. All those different characteristics. All those different names. You believe in it. You submit to it. You understand its meaning. However, you do not know its true reality or how it is or exactly the true nature of it. You do not know. If you're not capable of attaining the true reality of how Allah hears, how Allah sees, then you will not attain the true reality of how He will come on the day of resurrection, or how He descends, and how He will come with angels ranks upon ranks. He said, مَا الَّذِي جَعَلَكَ تَتَكَلَّفْ. If this is the duty that Allah saved you from, what is the thing that now made you taken as a burden? Where you would now try to describe Allah with something from your own whims or desires or your own opinion. Even though at the same time, like we said, you are incapable of these affairs of knowing how and the true reality of what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala described Himself. This is what we mentioned in summary yesterday. So, listen to what he goes on to say in the last line. إِذَا لَمْ تَعْرِفْ قَدْرَ مَا وَصَفْ فَمَا تَكَلُّفُكَ عِلْمَ مَا لَمْ يَصِفْ. If you do not know how of what Allah described Himself with, you don't know how those characteristics are. He said, what is your burden that you're taking on of trying to find a knowledge that Allah Ta'ala did not describe Himself with, nor did He inform you of? Meaning all this is just mere recklessness. You're just reckless. If you're incapable of attaining these affairs, you burden yourself with something that Allah saved you from, and you're burdening yourself with now trying to ascribe to Allah Ta'ala what He did not describe. For example, another from the affairs you'll find that the people from the deviant sects that they ascribe to Allah, He did not describe Himself with, for example, that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says that He descends every night, in the third part of the night. So they come with something different. They say, no, it's not Allah that descends. Rather, it's His command. Or rather, it's the angels. Or rather, it's His mercy. So they had taken on a burden of something, overburdening themselves with something that Allah did not burden them with. Allah made it clear, it's He that descends. You now are bringing other things and ascribing to Allah of what He did not make this complicated. So when a person hears a text from the Kitab and Sunnah, or from the Sunnah rather, that has come in a manner that's mutawatir, that's come in a manner that's reached the level where numerous amounts of Sahaba have conveyed, that Allah descends in the third part of the night. So now you overburden yourself to say, no, it's not Allah that descends. Don't listen to that. Rather, it's the angels. You burden yourself with a knowledge that Allah did not describe Himself with. Until you fell into confusion in a state of bewilderment, as we'll mention in a minute. He said all of this is being reckless, bad mannerism with Allah, وَافْتِيَاتٌ عَلَى اللَّهِ, lying upon Allah. What do you want with this? He said, can you now use this as an evidence for something where if you burden yourself with it, you went this deep, like you did, will you now overburden yourself and describe Allah Ta'ala from your whims and desires in your mind of what Allah did not describe Himself with? Do you think by this what you're doing that you're going to now attain some obedience or restrain from His disobedience? For verily, the servant, like we know, his duty every day is to set out, to carry out those duties in obedience that Allah Ta'ala has obliged upon us every day in order to attain His pleasure, for Him to be pleased with us. And same thing in order to abstain from His disobedience, so we can be saved from His anger. So why do you now take on this type of knowledge in which Allah Ta'ala did not burden the servant with, nor did He command you to do? All of these affairs are extremely dangerous. So let's continue. So this is what the great Imam Ibn al-Majishun goes on to say, that Shaykh al-Islam continues to convey. He said, فَأَمَّا الَّذِي جَحَدَ فَمَا جَحَدَ مَا وَصَفَ الرَّبِّ مِنْ نَفْسِهِ تعمقا وتكلفا أو تكلفا فقد استهوته الشياطين في الأرض حيران فصار يستدل بزعمه على جحده ما وصف الرب وسمى من نفسه بأن قال لا بد إن كان له كذا من أن يكون له كذا. Now I want everyone to pay very, very close attention to what I'm about to mention, because this requires a little bit of contemplation and one's undivided attention. So he says, قال الإمام عبد العزيز بن الماجشون. So the great Imam al-Majishun, Shaykh al-Islam, continues to mention this profound speech. He says, as for those who have rejected what Allah Ta'ala has described Himself, he said, and what they have now rejected of what Allah has described for Himself. ما وصف الرب من نفسه. He says, of them going too deep and overburdening themselves. Who did this? From who? From the Muslims, the Jahmiyyah, the Mu'tazila, the Asha'ira, and the Maturidiyya. And the Asha'ira sometimes, which we'll talk about in a minute. Listen to what Ibn al-Majishun goes on to say. He said, استهوته الشياطين في الأرض حيران. The shayateen have deluded them and led them astray in the earth in a state of bewilderment and confusion. So notice he used the ayah that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mentioned in the book about those who the devils have corrupted and dominated, till the point that he subhanahu mentioned concerning their affair, that they became in the earth in a state of bewilderment and confusion. And you'll find that the great Imam Ibn al-Majishun, that he mentioned the Muslims that fell into this type of deviation in regards to Allah's name and attributes, similar to those who the devils had dominated to the point where they left them in a state of confusion. So this is what he goes on to say, rahimahullah. وَفِعْلًا فِي حِيرًا لَيْسَ بَعْدَهَا حِيرًا. He said, for maybe perhaps the bewilderment or the confusion of the Asha'ira is severe, rather more severe. لأن أولئك تخلصوا من الصفات. He said, verily you'll find that the Asha'ira, as we mentioned and said, the affairs of how they are in a state of confusion will mention in a minute. As for the Jahmiyyah, just as you remember, and just as you've heard on many occasions, the Jahmiyyah didn't leave anything for Allah. Totally left out, and they're your clear enemy, where they have negated every characteristic and name of Allah Ta'ala, until the point where we know they negated the outside existence of Allah, where the only thing they affirm for Allah is the existence of the mind, which is ultimately, if you want to say from more frank words, more clear words, they fell into total, if you want to say, full-blown atheism. Full-blown atheism. Because once you negate the names and attributes of Allah, ultimately you're negating, or your negation is leading to something that's non-existent. Is it clear, everyone? طيب. As for the Mu'tazila, they have their portion of confusion, hayra, as Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mentioned in the ayah, which is Surah Al-An'am, ayah number 71. Then they fell into some type of al-hayra and confusion also. ولكن الحيرة الشديدة عند الأشاعرة. So also the Mu'tazila fell into this type of bewilderment and confusion, or if you want to say this type of bewilderment, or this state of confusion, where they affirm for Allah the names, but they remove the meanings from them, where they don't carry any meaning, which is also confusing. However, the most confusing state is the state of the Asha'ira, where you'll find that they're reluctant, they bounce between who? Between the Mu'tazila and the people of Sunnah. They try to bounce between them, which is the ultimate confusion. For one bounces between two sects without being firm upon a thing, being very solid upon that affair, shows that they're what? Confused. It's like a hypocrite that he now is confused about either being with the people who are upon disbelief and the people who are upon what? Iman. Extremely dangerous. Isn't it not, everyone? To bounce between the people of disbelief and the people of Iman, and to be in that state like that is an extremely dangerous state. So this is what Ibn Majishuni goes on to say. فما فصار يستدل بزعمه على الجحد ما وصف الرب وسمى من نفسه. Now listen to this. He said, so now they use as an evidence as they so-called claim upon their negation of what Allah Ta'ala has described himself, in which Allah has also named of himself, that they say, now listen to this. I want everyone to contemplate and we'll go slow. لا بد إن كان له كذا من أن يكون له كذا. That if Allah Ta'ala has this, meaning if he has this affair, then it necessitates that, or it means that he has this. What is he speaking about? This is what we're going to clarify. Meaning, if they hear anything of the characteristics of Allah, for example, from the Mu'tazila, or Yaqul Mu'tazili, for example, if we affirm these characteristics of Allah, then it necessitates that he has a body. Is it clear? So I'll stop at this point. So, number one, when Allah Ta'ala affirmed for himself these names and characteristics, these words were never used. The word body, those type of words were brought by the philosophers to confuse the Muslims. The origin of the word jism in regards to Allah or describing Allah was brought from the people of deviation and introduced from the philosophers and those Muslims that adopted it, meaning that philosophy, and tried to combine it with the aqidah of the Muslims. They started to use the word jism, which means body. But in its origin, the word body was not used. For example, when Allah Ta'ala mentions in this book, they created the heavens and the earth, and that which is between it in 6 days, then he ascended above the throne. The Salaf stayed firm of what came in the Quran. Just like that, just like how we mentioned it. That was it. Allah Ta'ala mentioned that he has 2 hands. That's what they said. Those Muslims who are affected by Greek philosophy, when they adopted philosophy and they tried to mix it with revelation, what happened was, as we know, they gave precedence to the mind over what? Revelation. That was the point of their disaster. That's where everything went left. So as a result of them putting their mind first over revelation and bringing these new words to say, oh, if Allah ascends above the throne, then it necessitates that he sits. What did they use? Intellect. What did they also fall into? Thinking Allah is like the creation, where Allah needs to recline on something if he sits on it or if he's above it. So what did they do? They fell into the human mind not accepting an affair of revelation. In addition to them saying that the only thing that we can affirm for Allah in regards to these characteristics is only in affairs that resembles the creation. Is it clear what I'm saying, everyone? Is it clear or not clear? You sure? Don't just say yes just to say yes. Yeah. Some people go like this, right? Half no, half yes. If not, نعيد لكم ما عندنا إشكال يعني إن كنا بحاجة إلى أن نعيد لكم نكرر لكم ما عندنا إشكال. لا تستحي تقول أعيد ما فهمت أعيد لا تستحي. Don't feel shy. Okay, everyone? You want me to repeat it or not? The people of philosophy gave precedence to the human mind. The people of the Sunnah gave precedence to the revelation. The Muslims that fell into adopting Greek philosophy, the error and the disaster came from this haythia, from here. It's number one. When they adopted Greek philosophy and they started translating the books and they started to adopt it and they mixed it with revelation. So they mixed the affairs of the devil, which is called glorification of the human intellect. They mixed it with revelation from Allah Ta'ala. As a result of it, what did they do? They said, for example, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says in the book, his book, he created the earth and that which is between it within 6 days, and he ascended above the throne. Their minds that have been affected by Greek philosophy only thinks like this, due to the fact that if Allah is above, then it necessitates that he sits. So that's the reason why we negate it. Or that if Allah is above, that means that the Arsh is either smaller than him, or bigger than him, or he's bigger than the Arsh and he doesn't fit. When you say these type of statements, what did you do? You resembled Allah with what? With the creation. So they use the mind in regards to Allah because in their minds they cannot get past something they did not see. So it has to be like this because this is the only thing we can accept in our minds, that something being above, that it can what? That it necessitates it has to be like this, or it has to be like the creation. And it's crazy because, as I mentioned on many occasions before, Allah has created things from the creation that is above, and it does not need to recline on anything for it to be constantly above us. From them is the stars, the moon, the sun. It's with you and it's above you constantly. Does it recline on something? No. If those are affairs that Allah created and it does not need to recline on anything for it to be constantly above, how can you cannot say that about Allah Ta'ala? So these are the affairs in which they were mentioned. Is it clear? So the only thing that comes to their mind is what resembles the creation. So they don't realize that at the same time, what they accused the people of the Sunnah of, they fell into it. That's why they negated it. Because the only thing they can think is something being above and it has to sit. So when you think that in your mind, what are you doing? You're falling into what? Resemblance. As a result of you falling into the resemblance, you fell into the next step, which is what? Negation. So what they accused the people of the Sunnah of, they fall into it. As a result of it, they negated it. Is it clear? So let's go back to what Ibn Majishun mentioned. He said, بأن قال لابد إن كان له كذا من أن لابد أن يكون أو من أن يكون له كذا. If Allah Ta'ala has this characteristic, then it necessitates that he has to what? Be like this. From those affairs in which you'll find that they brought of statements and words that were used from Greek terminology that was brought and adopted by the Muslims to cause confusion in their aqidah and their belief concerning Allah is the word body. The word body is a word that can necessitate truth and falsehood at one time. So they brought words that are confusing. Words that can carry what? Truth and falsehood. Haq, batil at the same time. The word body in its origin should not be used in regards to Allah. Is it clear, everyone? These words should not be used aslan. When they brought these words to cause confusion amongst the Muslims, such as the word body, then it came coming upon the people of the Sunnah to combat this falsehood by what? Saying that this word can contain truth and falsehood. So now what we do, we extract the falsehood and we leave the what? The truth so we can believe in it. But in its origin, the word body is not used and pertains to Allah's names and attributes. So keep in mind that just the mere usage of the word as it pertains to Allah and the affirmation of His name and attributes are what? Not to be used. And the word is jism. And there's other words that we're going to talk about in a minute. Jism can necessitate two things. Number one, the false meaning of the word jism, such as jism meaning something that has or resembles the creation, such as body parts. Body parts in which we know that meaning does not befit Allah. The affairs that pertain to say that Allah's name and attributes resembles the body parts of the creation is a meaning that we do not affirm. The other meaning of the word jism is the true meaning, such as something that has the characteristics that are complete in every aspect, but it does not resemble the creation, nor does it resemble body parts at all. Rather, those affairs are what? Befitting for Allah Ta'ala, and those characteristics that we affirm that befits Him, and they do not resemble the creation at all. Though that type of meaning for the word jism we do affirm, even though the word should not be used at all. Is it clear, everyone? From those affairs or those words that should be used is the word makan, place. Makan is another word. In its origin, should not be used. Shouldn't be used at all. The word makan. When we say, where's Allah? We can ask that question, but we don't say, for example, Allah Ta'ala, His place is such and such. We just say, He's above the heavens. Stick to what came in the Quran and Sunnah. However, with the people of Batil, what they did, they brought words which is confusing. So what they did, they used these words to cause confusion, to confuse the Muslims. So placed is another one of those type of words that can necessitate what? Truth and falsehood. Makan can mean, the false meaning of the word makan is the mean to say the word place, that if Allah Ta'ala is above, then that necessitates He's in a place where the directions contain Him. And He's contained in the heavens. So that means He's bounded or limited. That meaning is false. We do not affirm that, and that meaning is totally rejected. The other meaning, which is the true meaning that we accept, which also the word place contains, is that Allah is above, and that Allah Ta'ala at the same time, nothing contains Him. The heavens, the earth, nothing. Nor any of the directions. Rather, He Ta'ala, He encompasses everything with His knowledge, and rather He Himself is bigger than everything. If that's what you intend by the word place, that is the correct meaning. That is what we affirm. You understand? So those type of words, jism, makan, ard, ba'at, all those are words, or tanaqqul, are all words, those such as the word place, jihad, direction. Those are all words in its origin that should not be used. But the problem is, some of those from the people of falsehood started using these words. What came as a result of it, the people or the scholars of the Sunnah to defend the aqidah of the people of the truth had to come and clarify the truth from these words and the falsehood that they contain also at the same time. That's why you'll find that these words were used in their books. And sometimes some of those from the scholars of the past, you'll find that Sheikh Muhammad al-Majani said, you have to be careful because they still use those words in its proper context when they shouldn't have been used at all. Is it clear what I'm saying, everyone? Is it not clear? Do I have to repeat it again? J. Similar to that today, a person would say, how does this benefit us in these present day times? It does. How? Because the same plots and tricks of today is still used. For example, you'll find that the people falsehood of today will use the word, the statement, which is correct, but it also carries falsehood at the same time. We don't blind follow anyone. A person would say, that's a statement of truth. Yes, it is. We don't blind follow anyone. Is that statement correct or not correct? You'll find from those people who are upon falsehood of today, from them was an individual, his name was Abu Hassan al-Bahili. He used to say this statement, but he intended by it falsehood. We don't blind follow anyone. Ya akhi, blind following, as Ibn al-Qayyim mentions, breaks down into what? 5 types. That's a general blanket statement. In it is truth, and in it is what? Falsehood. Taqleed, the word taqleed breaks, you have the taqleed, number 1, the taqleed that is wajib. What's the taqleed that's wajib? The taqleed that's wajib in actuality is ittiba', which is following, which is submitting to the revelation of Allah and His Messenger. That type of taqleed is obligatory. And in actuality, it's not taqleed, it's ittiba', it's following, submitting. Submission. Then you have the type of taqleed, that is highly recommended. You have taqleed that's mustahab. For example, as soon as a Muslim embraces Islam, he needs to do some type of taqleed. Is there any getting around taqleed if you just enter the fold of Islam? So if you say we don't blind follow anyone, what is a person going to do if they just newly came in the fold of Islam? Except that they're going to have to do some type of what? Taqleed. You have to. And in some of us are students of knowledge. In certain affairs in which certain resources we don't have, with books and knowledge, we rely on Sahahahu al-Imam al-Albani. Sahahahu al-Hafid ibn Hajar. Al-Hafid ibn Hajar declared it to be authentic. Al-Imam al-Albani did claim it to be authentic. Those affairs is a type of what? Why? Because we have what? Confidence and reliability in these great scholars. Is it clear what I'm saying so far, everyone? Then you have the taqleed that is what? The taqleed that is haram. The taqleed of blind following in regards to a clear text from Kitab and Sunnah that you oppose. That taqleed is muharram. That blind following is muharram. It's impermissible. Meaning that you see as a clear text, but you decide to follow your desires or look for what suits your desires in a certain affair. In which in actuality they call tatabbu'ur rukhas, trying to find a legislative matter that suits you, or trying to find an opinion from a scholar that suits your desires. Even though you know the Kitab and Sunnah, you know the text and what it says clearly. That type of taqleed is muharram. It's impermissible. Is it clear what I'm saying, everyone? The point of the matter is, this type of tricks are still used to this day. So when a person says, we don't blind follow anyone, that's a blanket statement. That's a general statement. It contains in it what? Either truth or what? Falsehood at the same time. You have to make it clear what type of taqleed you're talking about. Because taqleed breaks down to different categories. Even I've heard the Hizbis to this day still use this statement. If you look in the UK where Abu Usama al-Dhahabi is, he still says the same. We don't blind follow any scholar. We don't blind follow any. And then, the Muslims who don't have knowledge, they'll say, yeah, we don't blind follow anyone. Yeah, what type of taqleed are you talking about? Which category? And give us an example of where we're blind following. Because taqleed breaks down to different categories. Because a Muslim right now that has no knowledge, and all these deviant sects out here for the Muslims, he's going to have to rely on someone he's confident of his religion in to what? To be firmly guided by, so he can avoid different atrocities that are out here. If he embraces Islam, do I go to such and such masjid? He tells them, no, don't go to the Sufi masjid. He just embraced Islam last week. What you going to tell? Oh, no, Akhi. You don't listen to him because you're not supposed to blind follow nobody. It doesn't make sense. Akhi, don't listen to them. Go to the masjid, see for yourself because you're not supposed to blind follow no one. Akhi is absolute idiot. That's simple. It's nonsense. So that's the reason why we say these type of blanket statements, you'll find the same tricks that we use in the time of old are the same tricks that are what? Used today. But anyway, to go back to the great Imam Ibn al-Majishun that he mentioned, rahimahullah, that he said that in regards to the Asha'ira, that verily they are what? They are confused. So, let's go back to what we just mentioned. They say that if Allah Ta'ala has this characteristic, it necessitates this. So, everyone has clarity with the examples we just gave? Like the word body, the word adl, or the word, like for example, place, and all those other statements that we just mentioned, right? Or words. Excuse me. For example, the Asha'ira that they say, لو كان مستويا على عرشه يجب أن يكون, we already mentioned this, إما أصغر من العرش أو أكبر من العرش أو مساويا للعرش وإن كان ينزل يلزم من ذلك التنقل. Or for example, we already just mentioned this, if Allah descends, then it necessitates movement or what have you. وذلك من صفات المحدثين. So that's from the characteristics of things that are created. So those are the affairs of what we just mentioned. Those words in its origin are not to be used as it pertains to Allah. Why? Because as a result of it, when they started using them in regards to our Lord subhanahu wa ta'ala, it caused doubt and confusion. That's the reason why you'll find that the ulama were very what? Stern. He was stern. They were stern on using these words in the first place. In regards to describing Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala of what He described Himself with, either in the book of Allah or the authentic sunnah. So the affair was just to stick to what came in the book of Allah of how Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said it, and also the message of sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. Even though, like we said, some of the time of the Salaf, they were forced to use these words in order to bring clarity, even though as a result of it, as you'll find that the great Muhammad al-Manjani, Sahib al-Aqidah, the great Imam al-Aqidah, he said, some of them in the past still fell into a little bit of mistakes in regards to the usage of these words, where they didn't clarify the truth that it contained and separating it from the falsehood. Is it clear? Like, we'll stop here, inshallah, because I want to, it gets a little bit more in depth, but we'll suffice with that, inshallah. Any questions about the lesson, anyone? Even the word jihad, direction, also is one of those words. Jihad. Jihad also is one of those words. Also, we'll get into it more in depth, inshallah, when the time comes. Fine. Anything else?
A lot of people that use, that we don't blind follow anybody. This is used so they don't actually follow how.
Exactly. Ahsant. You'll find we don't blind follow no one is a word, it's a statement in order to what? Just like you said, so they won't follow the truth. That's all why it's used. Just the only reason why it's used. Ahsant. So they give a general blanket statement without bringing the details that's in it to say, no, which category are you talking about? Because it's taqleed that we're bonded to follow. It's taqleed that's highly recommended, and you use it, you need it according to how much you need it for. For example, like we said, the new shahada, he just came to Islam. What is he supposed to do? I'm going to show you how to pray. I don't do taqleed. It doesn't make any sense. Let me show you how to pray. No. I learned my own way. Okay, well, maybe you're going to go a video. Yeah, I'll go in a video. But what you're doing still, it's a type of taqleed. Even if you do look on a video, it's still taqleed. It doesn't make any sense. So that's what he's saying. We break down the categories according to how much the person needs it. Even us as students of knowledge, we still rely on those scholars we have confidence in. Certain questions we can't answer, what do? We look for the answers of Sheikh Saleh Fawzan. Sheikh Saleh Fawzan, why? Because we have confidence that he's what? He's a scholar, we rely upon his knowledge. So, based upon the need of what we need of that knowledge, this is what we take. So every level is according to the level of that person in their knowledge. But to make a blanket statement to say there's no taqdeed at all with nobody, it's an absolute general blanket statement which is intended by what everyone falsehood. Is it clear what I'm saying? Allah Akbar, Allah Akbar. Is it clear, everyone? Any other clarity, extra clarity one needs? We'll stop here, inshallah. وصلى الله وسلم وبارك على نبينا محمد وعلى اله وصحبه. سبحانك اللهم وبحمدك اشهد ان لا اله الا انت استغفرك واتوب اليك.